Is Dave Ramsey's advice old-fashioned and out of touch reality? Is it bad, especially if you're in a younger generation like a millennial? Let's talk about that right now. Hello, my fellow Ripplers. This is Chris Miles, your cash flow expert and anti-financial advisor. The show is for you. Those of you that work so hard for your money, but you're now ready for your money. Start working harder for you today. You want that freedom. You want the cash flow right now. You want that passive income. So you work because you want to, not because you have to. And again, it's not just about getting rich. It's about living a rich life because as you're blessed financially, you now have a greater capacity to bless the lives of those around you. And that is why this show is here today, because I want to get you to break free. Stop worrying about your bills. Stop worrying about how you're going to take care of yourself. And instead, how you can start blessing and then creating a greater impact in the world around you. Thank you for allowing me to create that ripple effect through you. This show has now gone on 11 years, thanks to you guys. And so thank you so much for being a part of this today. If you ever want to look deeper and go deeper down this rabbit hole, to get more information and find out how you can actually take action on stuff, go visit our website, moneyripples.com. You can also follow us on social media at Money Ripples, no matter where it is, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook. Check out Money Ripples. Okay, so I want to talk about this article that came out in the Wall Street Journal. This is actually about a year old. I thought it was more recent, but this is about a year old now. About Dave Ramsey and really losing the younger audience, especially those that are under the age of 40. Okay, the article is Dave Ramsey tells millions to do with their money, but people under 40 say he's wrong. And pretty much it's just talking about like how everybody is just rejecting it. They hate what's going on right now. And so I want to talk about some of those key things they talk about that they really bring up that they have an argument with, and that's been trending on TikTok and Instagram and things like that. It's become more viral. But I want to give Dave also a fair shake because I'm a Gen Xer. I'm in between. I'm between the younger generation. I'm on my way to 50. He's about 64 years old now, right? And so I appreciate the work he's doing, but I also want to address and see where there's truth in what they're calling out. Okay, so let's talk about the things that they're complaining about right now. Like, what's the issue? Now, like I said, Dave Ramsey does great work. I think he does amazing things for helping people that have spending problems. He does a great job with people that have no financial education at all to at least give them some kind of education to get started. He helps them create good habits of budgeting and tracking your money, which I'm in favor of too. I teach more from a stewardship standpoint versus a saver standpoint, which is more in scarcity, but still, he gives them some good habits that they can use. Even a certain way of paying off debt, even though it's not the way I would do it. I'll talk about that here in the show about a different way of doing it. But again, he has some good baby steps. Even get a little emergency fund, even though he talks about $1,000 is a crap start. But for somebody who's starting from nothing, $1,000 is a good first step. So I appreciate that he has these tiny little baby steps to help along. When it comes to creating wealth and money, not so much. So let's talk about first and foremost, like where did most of these millennials have an issue with the things that has happened? Because Dave Ramsey, there's no surprise. Like this guy does not beat around the bush. He has a very strong opinion, and usually those opinions don't fall well, especially when there's so much absoluteness in it, right? Always do this, never do this. Like that's stupid. Like you get that kind of stuff from him all the time, right? And that doesn't always land on good ears, especially for those of us that actually have a brain, you know. Um, and this is one of the biggest issues. So, for example, they bring up the whole "pretty much screwed already" quote that he had, where he was talking about anybody who takes stimulus checks from the government, they're pretty much screwed already. And that didn't fall well with anybody that's in marginalized type of groups, especially those that are in the minorities and whatnot. They're like, hey, you're basically shaming us for taking money that we need. Like we got laid off, like we don't have work, we need this money. But of course, his answer is, oh, you're already screwed. Thanks. That's awesome. These are the very people, by the way, that he actually does want to help, supposedly, right? And I get it. Like I say stupid stuff too, and I'm not saying I absolve him from that, just because we're all human. So I don't excuse him for what he said. But at the same time, you got to understand that nobody's perfect, and you're put in the spotlight. That's a tough one. But that it's not just that one quote, right? If that were the only time he did it, it would be fine. But no, it's not the case. It's when people hear him say it over and over and over again, when he's constantly shaming people, it really does kind of really repel a lot of people. Many of you have actually been repelled by that, which is why you're listening to this podcast, because you're looking for something that's a little bit more balanced, right? A little bit more, emotionally mature in some ways than what you see from that. By the way, I'm not saying I'm the most emotionally mature person. My wife will attest to that too. But at least give it a fair shake. Just like I want to give him a fair shake to some level for what he does good, but also call out the stuff that isn't so good. Here's another part that a lot of people will disagree with. He went from bankruptcy to all of a sudden being a radio show host, right? Now, I'll tell you, what he's done as a radio show host really for the last, it's going on 33 years that he's been doing this. Incredible feat, right? No doubt. And I know there's been many millions of people have been benefited by that. What's interesting is that back in 1988, he filed for bankruptcy. Why? Because he was a young, as he would say, a young, dumb kid that was doing real estate investing. Now he'll tell you what is the thing he learned. He said this. He's like, how did rich people stay rich? By not paying interest to banks is what he always says, right? By not paying interest. So what I find fascinating about that is that, he went into the depths of bankruptcy, and the lesson he pulled out of it was don't go into debt. Don't pay interest to banks. That's how you get rich. I'm here to tell you that is not the one thing you need to do to get rich. And maybe somebody might overly simplify this and say, well, maybe he didn't mean that, Chris. Maybe he didn't. But when he's saying, like, how did rich get rich? Not paying interest to banks. Do you know how many wealthy people, including myself, have used banks and still use banks to this day to get rich? That's a problem for me. And I will say this too, like he calls out like what he did with real estate investing. Well, if real estate investing was so bad, why does he do so much of it? Because that is literally where most of his net worth is tied up. It's even more, he even has more real estate worth than what his business value is. His business value is arguable, but even though it's 1,000 employee company, it's argued to be right around $50 million or so is the value of his company. But his real estate, about $150 million or plus is where it's estimated at right now. So that means his real estate's like 3 times more valuable than his business. Now, that's not a bad thing, but it's interesting that he still did real estate, but what he took from it is never use mortgages, never go into debts to banks. Why? Because the experience he had is that he wasn't the typical real estate investor. He was doing very high risk strategies as a young 20-something-year-old kid. And as a result, because markets do change, the banks didn't like the kind of real estate strategies he was using because they weren't the traditional ones. He wasn't just buying properties like he does now. He wasn't doing that, guys. Like he was literally like actively moving money around, flipping properties, trying to do it really fast, things like that, which I have friends doing the same thing. And so when the bank said, no more, we don't want to do that, and we're calling our notes due, he was trapped and he didn't have the value. He didn't have the ability to be able to pay them back because the properties weren't worth that much. So he made mistakes in his real estate investing. He was an active real estate investor, not a passive one, an active real estate investor. Banks called bull on him basically, and basically forced him into bankruptcy. So for him to say, well, that's what I learned from this. Don't ever get in debt with banks because that interest and never be a slave to them. Well, the reason he was a slave is because he was taking high risks. Anyone who believes high risks create high returns don't deserve bank money. I repeat, anybody who believes in high risk creates high returns does not deserve bank money. In fact, really, you shouldn't be using your money at all because the truth is it's not high risk create high returns. High risk creates more loss. That's why banks didn't like him, because real investors know high risk does not create high returns. That's what dumb financial advisors try to convince you of and tell you. And even people like in the media, like Dave Ramsey, will tell you high risk creates high returns. No, it doesn't. It does not create high returns. It's based on lowering your risk, mitigating your risk as close to zero as possible so that you always get returns. That's how the rich become richer. And yes, you can use bank money to leverage that and make it work. A good example is one of my good friends who actually got blasted by Dave Ramsey. Sam Prim. Sam Prim's done real estate investing. Now, I don't 100% agree with everything Sam Prim says either. I do agree that sometimes he takes a little bit too much risk. And maybe he's just doing it for shock value to get people to be divisive and make comments, and that's how he gets more social media views. I don't know. I'm not the kind of person to want to be divisive with people that much. But what he's done, he's like, hey, I've got $50 million of real estate, but yeah, I've got $20 million of debt, but who cares? Because I still have a net worth of like $30 million because I got the debt That's why I was able to get wealthy. That's why I was able to become a multi-deca millionaire by doing that at such a young age. So yeah, he did do that, and I'm totally cool with that. I think it's fine. Now, I think that everybody should be leveraging debt. No, because it depends on what kind of steward you are with your money. If you are a gambler, if you do believe that high risk creates high returns, you shouldn't get bank money. You shouldn't go into debt. But if you're someone who's willing to be wise with your money, debt can actually be a great thing. So again, his lesson from bankruptcy. Remember, I was almost there too, and I was heavily in debt. Mostly that was an effect, not the cause. The debt wasn't the cause, it was the effect. But it definitely didn't help because as I kept going into more debt, I kept digging a deeper and deeper hole till I was nearly bankrupt. I could have gone bankrupt like Dave did. I chose not to. Personally, it was for spiritual purposes. It's nothing against him. It's nothing against anybody else, even you, if you went bankrupt. That was just my own personal choice. And I'm just so dang stubborn. I didn't want to do it. But I did have to dig out of a much bigger debt hole than he did to recover. And I was still able to get to the point where I was financially independent by 2016 later on because I was able to make it work again and again. And yes, I still leveraged debt, even though I had to rebuild my credit before I could even use debt. So I bootstrapped and was debt free for much of that time. Or all I had was like maybe a car loan, and that was it. Plus all the other past loans I might have had for collections and judgments. So I guess I wasn't debt free. But I wasn't taking on new debt. I wasn't trying to get more consumer debt. I was trying to be much like Dave Ramsey in a lot of ways to help rescue myself out of a situation. But to build my wealth, to get to that next level, I did leverage debt to be able to buy more properties and things like that so I could cash flow with less money out of pocket. All right, I'm not going to hit on that one, but let's move on to another one. No credit scores, right? He often will say that you don't need a credit score. He's proud that he doesn't even have a credit score, which is BS, by the way. He does. He has a credit score. But here's the big problem. When he tells you you don't need a credit score, that's just for people that have bad debt, bad advice, bad assumptions in general. Now, understand, understand bad credit scores. Remember, I was almost bankrupt. In fact, I would have had a better credit score had I filed for bankruptcy than what I had actually done by paying off my debt because there were so many collections and it was in there for so long. Like my credit score dipped below 500. Some of you might be like, oh, I'm in the high 500s or low 600s. Guess what? I was like way worse than you. Okay. And I had to rebuild that up to now I'm about an 840 credit score out of 850, right? I had to rebuild that. It took some time. And eventually you can get yourself to that kind of place. But I'll tell you, credit scores are valuable because the argument they'll make is like, oh, yeah, but guess what? Insurance rates are based on credit scores. That's a big deal. Even if you try to rent a house, even if you're debt free and you try to rent a house, guess what? We're doing credit pulls. Now you might show, here's the problem is that if you have no quote unquote credit history, how do they know you actually have the money to do it? Well, you can bypass that. You have to show them you got a lot of cash sitting around doing nothing. You got to show them that, maybe you try to show them you're paying bills, but even then they're like, yeah, but what does that mean about paying for a house payment? My mom was actually in the same place. My mom didn't really have credit history because she wasn't getting credit. She didn't buy a house until she was like about 60 years old or so. And then when she tried to get the house, the banks were pushing back on her because she didn't have the credit history. So even though she's like, well, I want to buy a home for the first time, have home ownership, which by the way, it did pay off in the end for her. It actually helped her get ahead in life. But it was like it was like fighting tooth and nail, getting higher interest rates, higher payments, which by the way, he doesn't like interest rates, but she had to get higher interest because of that. Now, could she have done his advice and like try to save up for the house? Yes, but that was a waste for her. It's like this, guys. Like when he tells you that you're supposed to save up money, this is even with investment properties. Save and save and save. Save up all this money until finally you can buy it in cash. Well, the problem is this, is that the price keeps climbing. While you're saving, trying to catch up, it's chasing away from you. It's like a Dalmatian chasing after a fire truck, right? It's like it's just chasing and chasing. It may never catch up. And even if you do, how much more you have to pay? Understand that when you get a mortgage, you lock the price in at that moment. You lock it in before it appreciates. You lock it in before the prices go higher. So you lock that in, and then you can focus on paying that down. That is a lot cheaper than trying to pay a much higher price. And then you finally get in, and then you got to wait for it to appreciate. Yeah, you're debt free. So what? You could have locked in that price. You could have been paying all that money you've been trying to save up. You could pay it towards your house, although I don't approve of that necessarily in most cases. You could pay all that extra money towards that house, pay it off, and still have all the equity and possibly even have more appreciation, more equity, and you're owning a home much sooner. So that advice I think is just dumb. So the fact he says like, don't worry about credit scores, That's just not real life. You need credit scores for more than just getting debt, right? It does apply to getting insurance. It applies even if you're trying to rent a house. If you've been following this podcast, you're probably looking for great ways to create passive income right now, right? Well, we got you covered here with Central Lending. Central Lending specializes in alternative investments that actually are designed to create steady returns and long-term financial security for you and your family. Now, they prioritize transparency. They love, building those strong relationships, giving you that confidence and peace of mind, knowing that you have your money working harder for you, so you don't have to work so hard for that money. You want to learn more how to do that? Go to centrallending.com and check out what they've got today to create your passive income and wealth creation right now. Now, the debt snowball method, right? Now, this has been argued by a lot of people because he doesn't say pay off the highest interest rate. He says pay off the lowest balance first because you need that quick win. I actually kind of agree with him on this. Now, I'm not saying this is the case all the time. This is the problem. There's a camp of people say always go for the highest interest rate. And there's a camp of people saying always go for the lowest balance. That's where his debt snowball comes in versus the debt avalanche method, right? And so they argue about what's best. Yeah, I mean, you get an example of like this professor from Yale School of Management who studied it, all these gurus, and he's like, I don't think that advice pans out. But I will say there is something to truth, what Dave Ramsey says, that if you get a quick win, it makes it easier. If you pay off that debt and that payment's gone, it's gone. The hard thing is, especially when he's trying to blanket statement this, right? Like whether it's credit cards, car loans, house loans, whatever, right? You're just trying to pay towards it and then eventually get rid of the payment. And so go for the lowest balance to get rid of the payment first. Now, others will say, yeah, but the numbers say the highest interest. Now, from my experience, I remember being the person just like Dave Ramsey. I was the financial advisor. I was buying into all this stuff. And I worked with this guy in my office that created this spreadsheet that would actually go and find the right order of how to pay off which loans faster, like which would get you debt free faster with the amount of money that you're trying to put it away, and do the snowball type method. What shocked me was that sometimes it wasn't about paying the highest interest. Sometimes it was about paying the lower balance. He was right. There are sometimes that actually was better that they'd say, no, pay minimum payments on this high interest credit card in the meantime, because if you pay off this lower balance, it frees up the cash flow to then use that to pay off the higher interest credit card later on. And so it was fascinating to see that sometimes the interest rate people were right, and sometimes the minimum, the smaller balance people like Dave Ramsey were right too. And that's what led me to my own situation. Remember, pulling myself out of bankruptcy, I had to decide which one's better. Should I be investing my money? Should I be paying off debt? I was looking at a bigger picture than just debt, right? Some people get blinders on, only look at their debt. They ignore the whole financial picture, but you need that whole financial picture to actually accelerate to freedom faster. And so I was looking at everything because cash flow is the real key freedom factor here, right? Is what's the money that you have extra to use that gives you more freedom, more options. And so when I was looking at this, I was like, well, do I invest money? Do I pay off debt? I realized that a lot of times paying off debt would give me the highest rate of return compared to my investments. But then I was looking at it, I was like, well, which one does it better? And I started looking at rate of return. Which one gives me the best cash flow freed up for the least amount of dollars out of pocket? This is what birthed the Cashflow Index. If you even Google it, you'll see plenty of people now starting to teach the Cashflow Index. This is what we did. I took that actual balance of that loan and I divided by the minimum monthly payment, and it would give me a number. The lower the number, the better is paid off. Now, initially, I did it based on rate of return. I did it like because that lower number would have a higher rate of return, right? So I'll give you an example. If you have a $10,000 car loan, it's a $500 a month payment. It has an index of 20. But I also have a $10,000 credit card, even if it's higher interest, but it's a $200 a month payment, it's an index of 50. But just looking at common sense, remove those numbers out of your head for a second. If all I have is 10,000 bucks, one of them is a $500 a month car loan, the other is a $200 a month credit card. Which one do you think will give you more options and more freedom? Which one will put you in a healthier financial situation, even according to the banks that look at you when they look at whether they're going to lend money to you? You got to pay off the car first. I don't care if it's 4%. That would say pay off the car first because it frees up the most cash flow. Your debt to income ratio gets better. When banks look at you, they look at your debt to income ratios. What's your income compared to the debt payments that you have to pay? The lower they are compared to your income, the healthier your finances are. Banks do this all the time. They get tons of debt. Every time you put a dollar in savings, they have debt to you because they pay you interest, don't they? But they don't worry about that. They'll even lend out more money than they have in their possession because they know they can be wise stewards of that money. So when they look at you, it's like, what's the cash flow coming out? They look at that. And so I use the cash flow index. That helped me dig out of that $1 million plus debt hole. And it's helped so many more of our clients literally free up millions and millions of dollars a year by using that method instead of either of those. So, anyways, if you were to look up anything, I would do that. And that kind of goes on with this conversation of debt, like embracing debt, because Dave Ramsey is just like never, ever, ever have debt. But again, you get people like, like they have this Kate Hinman, who's somebody out of California. She looks at that stance of like not having debt. She's like, well, I just consolidate all my $30,000 of credit card debt. And I pay $1,200 a month at an 8% interest rate. She's like, I thought that was good. And she's like realizing it's like, maybe for us younger generation, maybe it's different for us. Maybe debt is the new normal. Maybe having some debt is okay. And I'll end on this, right? And we're not even talking about the retirement stuff. I already hammered that one quite a bit for you, didn't I? But when it comes to retirement, and that thing, that's another story. But when it comes to debt, is it the new normal? It doesn't have to be. No. But I'll tell you this. It was the old normal back then. Even for Dave Ramsey, using debt was still the same as it is today. The only difference is the interest rates are lower now. Even though we've seen interest rates go up, interest rates were higher before. In the 1980s, he was seeing very, very high interest rates, a different scenario, a different situation. Even the 1990s, your mortgage rates were higher than they are today. I remember being a mortgage broker in the early 2000s. I remember telling people, man, the interest rates are awesome right now. You can get a 6% mortgage. Now, right now, it's not much higher than that. But I remember thinking, oh, it came down because we used to quote 7% around 9/11 time. So we were quoting around 7% back then, which is about where it is now. And we're thinking 6% was amazing. Some of you have got mortgage rates like at 3, 4% or less. I've got a mortgage rate at 2.75% on a jumbo loan that I got 3 years ago. Do you think I want to pay off my mortgage anytime soon? No, because that extra cash can be used to make way more than 2.75%. And as you've heard me teach on this channel, right? Whether it be the podcast or even if you've watched like other master classes and whatnot, like about infinite banking, I teach about compounding versus simple interest. If I have a 2.75% mortgage, I only need to earn about a 1.25% return on my money that I could use to pay off my house at any day, but I don't. Because if I earn at least 1.25% compounded return, I can at least match the 2.75% interest rate of that mortgage as I pay it down with principal and interest. I don't want to pay off my mortgage sooner than I have to. It's not that I can't, I just don't want to. I can do so many more things to accelerate and grow my wealth faster. But again, this is what it really comes down to. The hard thing is everybody's trying to give this blanket advice, live on rice and beans, right? And by the way, I actually heard a caller that literally she called in depressed about her debt. And then she told Dave Ramsey she was living on rice and beans. And Dave like made fun of her. He shamed her for following his advice. He's like, well, that's just a figure of speech. You should get, lettuce and tomatoes too. She's like, oh, well, I lived on rice and beans. And she was depressed. A woman that had paid off so much debt, and she was depressed because she followed his advice to the T. And that's the danger. I hope really that you even question what I teach you here. I'm totally okay if you question it because I want you to think for yourself. I want you to be empowered that way. I want you to be able to have a brain. I don't want you to go after pundits that just tell you, just do this, do that. And then you just turn your brain off and trust them. That makes you a lazy steward. In fact, that really doesn't make you a steward at all. It just makes you a lazy agent of your life. And you can never, ever, ever, ever have financial freedom if you're always relying on somebody else to tell you what to do. It's fine if you get somebody to help guide and walk alongside you. That's what we do with our one-on-one coaching. That's fine. But you need to be empowered by this information. You need to be empowered by this education, know how to apply it in your own life, and know the nuances because it's not always black and white. As much as he tries to make it simple, and that's why people catch on to it because he never changes his tune. He never changes his advice. But the problem is that advice can actually hurt you. It can actually hurt you. That's what it did to that lady, right? She lived on rice and beans, literally. You might say, well, not everybody does that. Well, I've known people that have thrown their money in the stock market, paid off their debt. And guess what? They come to us saying, okay, I'm worth $2 million, mainly because I saved a lot of money, not because Dave Ramsey gave me good advice, but I've been packing money away. I've got $2 million of net worth, but I have zero income coming in from it. I'm never going to be able to retire. What's the answer? Again, you have to be able to have different thinking, even with paying off debt. Even if I use the cash flow index, did you know that there's times I might say, here's where you ignore the index, or here's where we would flip flop these ones. We wouldn't just go for the lowest index score. We might go for the one that's higher and then go for the lower one later based on these factors. Or we'll pay extra on credit cards, for example, but we'll pay nothing extra on car loans, student loans, and mortgages because we want to keep that money in cash and then pay it with one check. Little nuances like that make a difference. But again, because you get these pundits out there that just try to give you blanket advice to say everybody should do this. That is where they always go wrong. That's why I never say everybody should be doing the same kind of real estate investments. No, there's a specific formula that's meant for you based on your goals, your objectives, your timeline that will work better than other things. That's why I can't give you blanket advice on this. That's why I'm trying to teach you and empower you with what we're telling you here so that you understand the bigger picture of what it means to be a steward of your money, what it means to be a wiser steward where you know how to make your money work harder for you. So again, you don't have to work so hard for it. Of course, as always, you always have questions, reach out to us, moneyripples.com. But this is the thing, be sure to question it. It's not just Dave Ramsey, right? He gets picked on all the time. It's not just Ramit Sethi. I pick on him sometimes too. I like some of his stuff and I don't like some of his stuff. And hopefully, maybe there's somebody out there that likes some of my stuff and doesn't like some of my stuff. And that's okay. We all have our different lens and our different perspectives. But I'm here to tell you, at least I know my stuff works. At least I know it's been a proven system that works. Is it perfect? No, of course not. Because life's not perfect. Life can throw you curves to throw you off on your plan of what you're trying to accomplish. But I will tell you this much. I know that as I stay open to learning and knowing that I don't know everything, and I know that I'm always growing and that there's some times that I've realized I'm wrong, as I keep doing that, the stuff that I help share with you just gets better and better and better. And that's my hope for you as well, is that you start to turn your brain on, you start to think for yourself, and you start to find out these principles so then the strategies can work within those principles. That's my hope for you guys. Again, let us know how we can support you. Make it a wonderful and prosperous week.